Marcus was not the kind of boy who liked to draw attention. He had always been quiet, even in his old neighborhood where everyone knew him as the boy who kept his head down and walked straight home after school. But this was not his old school anymore. This was a new place, a bigger campus in a town where he did not know anyone. His family had moved because his mother wanted a better future for him, and Marcus promised her that he would try his best to stay out of trouble. Still, he knew the first day was never easy for someone who looked different, acted different, or simply carried himself with a certain kind of silence. When he stepped onto the school grounds, Marcus wore his favorite red hoodie. The hoodie gave him comfort. It was the one thing that reminded him of home, of long walks with his younger sister, of the little gym where he used to train in the evenings. He adjusted the straps of his backpack and kept walking, his eyes scanning the unfamiliar faces. The sound of chatter, laughter, and footsteps echoed in the wide courtyard. Everyone seemed to know each other already. Groups were forming in every corner, friends greeting friends, students sharing stories from summer break, athletes tossing a football, and cheerleaders laughing loudly near the gym doors. Marcus did not belong to any of them, not yet. He walked with steady steps, neither fast nor slow, and though his face showed no emotion, his mind was busy. He noticed the way some heads turned. He noticed the way whispers followed him. He knew the signs. He had seen them before. Being the new kid was already hard, but being the new black boy in a mostly white school was something else entirely. He did not complain. He simply breathed deep and reminded himself of the promise to his mother. Stay calm. Stay focused. You are stronger when you do not let them break you. Inside the hallway, he stopped at his locker. The number had been given to him earlier, and he fumbled slightly with the combination lock before it finally clicked open. He placed a few books inside, glanced at his schedule, and tried to memorize the room numbers. His goal was simple: get through the day, sit in his classes, learn quietly, and return home without any trouble. But life rarely goes according to plan. It started small. 2 boys walked past him, snickering as if he were part of a private joke. One of them said loud enough for Marcus to hear, "Looks like we've got some fresh meat." The other chuckled, bumping into Marcus's shoulder on purpose as they walked by. Marcus did not react. He shut his locker, picked up his notebook, and walked toward his first class. He could feel their eyes still on him, but he kept moving. That was how he had been taught. Do not give bullies the reaction they want. By lunchtime, however, the tension was harder to ignore. Marcus carried his tray and searched for a quiet corner. He spotted a table near the back of the cafeteria, away from the loud groups, and sat down. He opened his juice box, unwrapped his sandwich, and tried to enjoy his meal in peace. But the same 2 boys from earlier showed up again, and this time, they were not alone. 3 more boys joined them, making a group of 5. They swaggered through the cafeteria, laughing loudly as if they owned the place. One of them pointed at Marcus. "Hey, new kid," he called out. His voice was full of mockery. "You lost? That's our table." Marcus looked at them, then glanced around. The cafeteria was half full. Dozens of empty seats were available. He knew it was not really about the table. He stayed calm. "There are other tables," he replied simply, his tone even and without fear. That answer only made them laugh harder. The leader of the group, a tall boy with sandy hair and a blue t-shirt, stepped closer. He slammed his hand down on Marcus's tray, knocking over the juice box and spilling it across the table. A hush fell over the nearby students. Eyes turned toward the scene. Everyone waited to see what Marcus would do. Marcus took a slow breath. He wanted to stand up, but he stopped himself. He remembered his promise. He wiped his hand with a napkin, looked at the boy, and said, "You don't have to do that." The bully sneered. "Oh, I do. You think you can just walk in here with your tough look, your hoodie, and act like you belong? You don't. People like you don't belong here." The words were sharp. They cut deeper than the spilled juice. Marcus felt heat rising in his chest, but he kept his voice steady. "I just came here to learn. That's all." The boys laughed again, louder this time, making sure everyone heard. "Learn from who?" "From us," the leader mocked. Another boy added, "He probably can't even keep up. Look at him. He's nothing." Marcus clenched his fists under the table, hidden from view. He wanted to walk away, but his legs felt heavy. He wanted to fight back, but his mother's voice echoed in his mind. "Control your strength, Marcus. Do not let anger guide you. Use your discipline, not your rage." So he stood up, not to fight, but to leave. He picked up his tray, what little remained of it, and walked past the group. They jeered at him, throwing more insults, but Marcus did not respond. He found another empty corner and sat down again. Inside, though, something was beginning to shift. The rest of the day carried the same energy. Whispers in the hallways, laughter behind his back, a shoulder bump here, a mocking glance there. Marcus endured it all in silence. To his classmates, it looked like he was ignoring them, but inside he was storing every word, every shove, every insult. His patience was not weakness. His silence was not fear. It was control, the kind of control only someone trained to fight could understand. After the final bell, Marcus stepped outside the school building. He thought the day was finally over, but the group of bullies waited for him near the courtyard steps. A small crowd gathered quickly, sensing a confrontation. The leader stepped forward, his friends forming a circle around Marcus. "Where do you think you're going, hoodie boy?" the leader asked, shoving Marcus's chest lightly, testing him. "You think you can walk around here like you're better than us? You're not. You're nothing." Marcus stared at him, his breathing calm but his eyes sharp. The crowd grew silent. Students leaned closer, waiting to see what would happen. The bully smirked and said the words that crossed the line. "Leave now, ape." Gasps filled the air. The cruelty of the word hit like a stone, heavy and humiliating. For a brief second, Marcus closed his eyes. His heart pounded in his chest. He could hear his own breathing. He could hear his mother's voice too, but it was faint now, drowned by the wave of anger rising inside him. His body tensed, his fist clenched at his side, and his silence became dangerous. The bullies laughed, thinking they had won. The crowd shifted nervously. Some students looked shocked. Others whispered to one another. No one dared to step in, but Marcus was done being silent. The courtyard was heavy with silence after the cruel word left the bully's mouth. Students stood frozen, some covering their mouths in shock, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Marcus felt his stomach twist with a mixture of anger and sadness, emotions he had learned to hide since childhood. He had experienced moments like this before, moments where he was judged for the color of his skin, moments where people wanted to reduce him to nothing more than a target. But each time, he reminded himself of the discipline his mother had raised him with, the discipline his old boxing coach had drilled into him day after day inside the gym. "Strength is not about destroying people, Marcus," his coach used to say. "Strength is about knowing you could, but choosing when it is truly necessary." Those words echoed in his head as the boy in the blue shirt pushed him again, harder this time, testing his balance and his patience. Marcus took a step back, his red hoodie shifting as he adjusted his stance, but he still did not raise his fists. His silence only seemed to encourage the bullies. The leader grinned with satisfaction, his friends laughing and urging him on like spectators at a cruel show. "What's the matter?" the boy shouted. "Did the ape lose his voice? You gonna stand there and do nothing?" Another boy on his left joined in, shoving Marcus lightly on the shoulder and backing away quickly as if daring him to retaliate. The group had created a circle now with Marcus in the middle, the crowd surrounding them waiting for the inevitable. Marcus breathed deeply through his nose, controlling the fire building in his chest. He could feel dozens of eyes on him, judging him, waiting for him to explode. But he was not going to give them the satisfaction. At least not yet. Instead, he looked directly into the leader's eyes, not with fear but with calm intensity. His stare was unshaken, steady, and it unsettled the bully more than he expected. For the first time, the boy hesitated, his smirk faltering slightly. Marcus's silence was not weakness. It was a storm building beneath the surface. The bully covered his hesitation by laughing louder, turning to the crowd. "See that? He won't do anything. All talk, no fight. Just a scared little boy hiding in his hoodie." The words stung, not because they were true, but because Marcus knew how quickly people believed lies when they were shouted with confidence. He thought of his younger sister, how she looked up to him, how she counted on him to set an example. He thought of his mother, who worked long hours just to keep them safe and in school. If he lashed out now, if he lost control, it would not just be his fight. It would follow his family's name. He clenched his fists tighter but kept them at his sides. The crowd began to murmur. Some of them wanted to see Marcus fight back. Others were uncomfortable, realizing how cruel the bullies were being. A girl near the front whispered to her friend, "Why don't the teachers stop this?" But no adults were nearby. The moment belonged to the students, and everyone waited to see what Marcus would do. The leader, frustrated by Marcus's refusal to react, decided to humiliate him further. He reached out suddenly and yanked the strap of Marcus's backpack, pulling it hard so that the bag slipped off his shoulder and fell to the ground. Books scattered onto the pavement, the sound of them hitting the ground echoing in the tense silence. The crowd gasped. The bully laughed again, louder than before, kicking one of the books across the courtyard. "Oops," he mocked, pretending it was an accident. His friends joined in, picking up Marcus's belongings and tossing them around like a cruel game of catch. Marcus bent down slowly, his jaw clenched tight, and began gathering his things. His notebook, his pens, his folder, all of them were important to him because they symbolized the reason he was here, the future his mother dreamed of for him. Each time he reached for an item, one of the bullies would kick it further away. It was not just about breaking his belongings. It was about breaking his spirit. The crowd began to shift uncomfortably. Some students wanted to help but were too afraid to step in. Others were enjoying the show, cheering the bullies on. Marcus's patience was thinning. He picked up the last of his books, straightened himself, and looked at the leader again. His voice, when he finally spoke, was calm but strong, carrying across the courtyard. "I don't want trouble," he said. "But you need to stop," the leader sneered. "Or what?" he asked, stepping closer, his nose almost touching Marcus's. "You gonna cry? You gonna run back home? You don't belong here, and we're gonna make sure you know it." He shoved Marcus again, harder this time, with both hands against his chest. The crowd gasped. Some students whispered that Marcus should walk away. Others said he should hit back. Marcus stayed rooted where he stood, his body unmoving as if the shove had been nothing. His calmness made the bully angrier. One of the friends, eager to impress, grabbed Marcus's hoodie and tugged it roughly. "Take this off. You don't need it," he mocked, trying to strip Marcus of the one thing that gave him comfort. Marcus pulled away, his face still calm but his eyes sharper now, like a blade hidden in its sheath. He had reached the edge of his patience. He could take the words. He could take the laughter. But trying to rip away the piece of him that connected him to his home, his family, and his identity, that was different. The bullies did not realize it yet, but the line had been crossed. The humiliation attempt had gone too far. Marcus's breathing deepened, his chest rising and falling slowly as he regained control of himself one last time. He remembered his promise, but he also remembered something else his coach used to say. "When the time comes that you have no choice, do not fight with hate. Fight with discipline. Show them control and they will never mistake you for weak again." The leader, still grinning, shoved Marcus once more, this time shouting the cruel word again, louder so the entire crowd could hear. The word rang out in the courtyard like a gunshot, and for a moment the entire world seemed to freeze. Marcus's fists tightened at his sides, his knuckles whitening. His silence was no longer calm. It was dangerous, powerful, and full of a storm waiting to be released. The crowd felt it, even if they did not understand it. The bullies laughed, blind to the change in the air, but the students watching began to realize something important. Marcus was not the weak boy they thought he was. He was holding something back, and when it came out, it would change everything. And in that moment, everyone knew the humiliation was about to end, and the bullies were about to discover the truth about the quiet boy in the red hoodie. The courtyard had grown into a stage where every eye was fixed on Marcus. The insults had already cut deep, and the attempts to humiliate him had gone further than anyone could excuse. His books had been scattered, his hoodie had been pulled, and the word the leader had shouted twice now still hung in the air like a heavy shadow. For most people watching, it was just another moment of cruelty in a high school day. But for Marcus, this moment was more than that. It was the tipping point of everything he had carried with him, his mother's sacrifices, his coach's teachings, his own promise to be better, and the silent burden of being judged before being known. Marcus stood tall, his shoulders squared, his chest rising and falling with each deep breath. The bullies saw only a boy in a hoodie, but what they did not know was the years of discipline buried beneath his calm expression. Every afternoon back in his old neighborhood, Marcus had trained. While others his age played video games or hung out in parks, he had stepped into a small boxing gym with worn-out gloves and the sound of skipping ropes echoing in the background. He had learned how to stand, how to breathe, how to strike with precision and restraint. His coach had made him repeat the same movements thousands of times until they became second nature. It was not about fighting for the sake of fighting. It was about control, respect, and understanding your own strength. Marcus had kept all of that hidden since moving here. Nobody at this new school knew who he really was, and maybe that was why the bullies thought they could break him. The leader shoved Marcus again, laughing with his friends. "Say something," he demanded. "You just gonna stand there?" His voice was sharp, his face red with arrogance. The crowd waited. Some students were on edge, whispering to each other that Marcus should not take this any longer. Others were smirking, thinking they were about to see a new kid crumble. Marcus did not move. His eyes, though, told a different story. Then, for the first time, Marcus spoke louder than before. His voice was calm but carried a weight that silenced even some of the laughter. "I told you already," he said, looking directly at the leader. "You need to stop." The words seemed simple, but the way Marcus said them made the air shift. The leader sneered, pretending not to be affected. "Or what?" he snapped. "You gonna make me? You think you scare me?" His friends laughed again, but the sound was nervous this time, thinner than before. The tension in the courtyard grew heavier. Marcus's jaw tightened. He had tried. He had given them every chance to walk away. But their cruelty had gone too far. His coach's advice rang clear in his mind. When you have no choice, don't fight with rage. Fight with purpose. Let your actions speak. The leader reached out again, this time grabbing Marcus's hoodie with both hands as if to pull him closer. But Marcus moved, not with wild anger, but with calm, sharp precision. He shifted his stance, stepping back just enough to break the boy's grip. The leader stumbled forward slightly, surprised by how easily Marcus had slipped away. The crowd gasped. It was not a punch, not yet, but it was the first glimpse of something different. Marcus was not frozen. He was not powerless. "Stop," Marcus repeated, his voice steady. The leader's pride burned at being embarrassed in front of so many people. His friends urged him on. "Don't let him get away with that," one of them shouted. The bully straightened, his smirk returning as he puffed out his chest. "You think you're tough?" he jeered. "You're nothing. You don't belong here." And then he made the mistake that shifted everything. He raised his voice and shouted the word again, louder than before, trying to break Marcus completely. In that instant, Marcus felt a surge of emotion run through him. Not blind rage, but a cold, controlled decision. He could not walk away anymore. He had tried patience, he had tried silence, he had even tried reasoning. None of it mattered to these boys. They only understood dominance, and the only way to make them stop was to show them a strength they had never seen before. The crowd leaned forward, breaths held. Marcus's body moved slightly, a subtle shift in his shoulders, the kind of movement only trained fighters make before they act. The bullies did not notice it, but the crowd did. A murmur spread quickly. Something was about to happen. The leader lunged at Marcus, pushing him with all his weight. But this time Marcus did not just absorb it. His training took over. With fluid precision, he sidestepped, letting the bully's momentum carry him forward, and placed his hand on the boy's arm, guiding him off balance. The leader stumbled, nearly falling, and the laughter in the crowd broke into gasps. Marcus had not even hit him. He had simply redirected him, but the ease of it stunned everyone. The bully turned back, his face red with humiliation. "You think that makes you tough?" he shouted, trying to cover his embarrassment. His friends stepped forward, forming a tighter circle. They were no longer laughing. They could sense the shift. Marcus was not an easy target. Marcus stood tall, his breathing calm, his fists still at his sides. His eyes scanned the group slowly, making it clear he was ready if they continued. The crowd was silent now, the weight of anticipation pressing on everyone. The leader, desperate to prove himself, rushed forward again, swinging his arm clumsily as if to shove Marcus's head. But Marcus had spent years training for moments like this. With a quick movement, he ducked slightly, lifted his arm, and blocked the strike cleanly. He did not throw a punch back, not yet. He simply stopped the attack, holding his ground with strength that surprised even the bully. The crowd erupted in whispers. "Did you see that?" one student said. "He blocked him like it was nothing." Another added, "He's not fighting back, he's just stopping him." The leader pulled his arm away, his confidence shaking. For the first time, doubt flickered in his eyes. Marcus, however, did not look shaken at all. His expression was calm, but his eyes were sharp, focused, and unyielding. The other bullies began to hesitate. They had come here expecting an easy show of dominance, a chance to embarrass the new kid. But what they were facing now was something entirely different. Marcus was not just another boy they could push around. He was controlled, disciplined and far stronger than they had imagined. The leader tried to save face, raising his voice again. "You think you're special? You think you can fight us all?" But his words lacked the confidence they had before. His friends looked uncertain, glancing at each other. The crowd could feel it too. The balance of power had shifted. Marcus did not answer the bully's question. He simply straightened his shoulders and spoke one last time, his voice calm but filled with weight. "I told you to stop. This is your last chance." The silence that followed was deafening. The bullies were not used to being challenged like this. The crowd, meanwhile, leaned in, knowing the breaking point had been reached. Everyone could sense it. The moment when silence would no longer hold, when Marcus would finally unleash the strength he had been holding back. And in that courtyard, with the weight of humiliation pressing on him and the eyes of the entire school fixed on his every move, Marcus stood ready. The bullies had pushed him too far, and they were about to discover that the quiet new boy in the red hoodie was not someone they could break. He was someone they had underestimated, and that mistake would change everything. The circle around Marcus grew tighter as more students gathered, some standing on benches to see better, others pulling out their phones though they hesitated to record. Something about the tension in the air felt different than the usual school fight. It was not the wild kind of energy that came with kids swinging recklessly, shouting and running away. This was something quieter, heavier, like a storm building behind the stillness of the clouds. Everyone knew Marcus was at the edge of breaking, but no one yet understood what that would mean. The leader smirked, trying to reclaim the confidence he had lost. He clenched his fists, trying to look bigger and tougher, but the truth was written in his eyes. For the first time, he felt unsure. The new kid had not even thrown a punch, but the way he had deflected, the way he had stood without fear, was enough to shake him. Still, pride would not let him back down. Pride made him step forward again, chest puffed out, trying to show that he was still in control. His friends encouraged him with nervous laughter, pushing him forward. Marcus did not move. He stood still, his red hoodie almost glowing against the dull brick of the school wall behind him. His breathing was calm, his shoulders squared, his stance balanced. He looked like he belonged not in a schoolyard standoff but in a ring, prepared and waiting for the right moment. His coach's words played again in his head, clear as if the man were standing right there. "Do not waste your energy. Do not strike unless you have to. One clean move, that is all it takes to change everything." The leader lunged, throwing a wild swing meant to smack Marcus across the face. It was sloppy, driven by anger more than skill, and Marcus saw it before it even reached him. In one smooth motion, Marcus stepped aside, lifted his arm, and blocked the strike cleanly. The bully stumbled forward, caught off balance, and in that split second, Marcus acted. It was not reckless, not angry, but sharp and controlled. His hand shot forward, a single strike to the bully's chest, not meant to injure, but to stop. The boy fell backward, landing hard on the pavement with a gasp as the air was forced out of him. The courtyard erupted in shock. Some students shouted, others gasped, and a few cheered quietly under their breath. Phones that had hesitated before were now lifted higher, capturing what they knew was not just a fight but a revelation. Marcus had finally moved, and the strength behind that one strike was enough to send the leader crashing down. The bully scrambled to sit up, coughing, his face red with both pain and embarrassment. He looked around at his friends, desperate for them to help him, but they were frozen. They had never seen him fall before, not like this, and certainly not in front of the entire school. Marcus, meanwhile, did not chase him, did not raise his fists again. He stood where he was, calm, steady, his eyes fixed on the group. "I told you to stop," Marcus said, his voice low but carrying across the courtyard. The words cut deeper than the strike had. The crowd hushed again, watching the boy on the ground, watching Marcus, who stood above him, not with arrogance but with unshaken dignity. For a moment, even the bullies were unsure what to do. Then one of the leader's friends, shorter but stockier, stepped forward. His pride was tied to the group, and seeing their leader fall was too much for him to bear. "You think you're tough because you got lucky?" he shouted, charging toward Marcus with his fists raised. Marcus exhaled slowly, bracing himself. He knew he could not run, and he knew walking away now would only invite more torment later. So he planted his feet, shifted his weight the way his coach had taught him, and waited. When the boy swung wildly, Marcus ducked and stepped to the side. With precision, he tapped the boy's arm away and moved forward, placing his hand firmly against the boy's shoulder. A twist of motion, simple and efficient, sent the bully stumbling forward, losing his balance and nearly falling to his knees. The crowd gasped again. It was becoming clear. Marcus was not just reacting by luck. He was trained. His movements were too sharp, too smooth, too deliberate. Every block, every shift, every counter was the mark of someone who had spent years learning discipline. Another boy tried his luck, rushing from Marcus's left. This time Marcus did not wait. He stepped in quickly, blocking the attack before it landed and pushing the boy back with a firm shove to the chest. It was not brutal, not violent. It was controlled strength, the kind that stopped the fight without going further than needed. The boy stumbled back into his friends, nearly falling. Now the crowd erupted, voices overlapping as realization spread. "He knows how to fight," one student whispered loudly. "He's trained," another added. The bullies glanced at each other nervously. They had thought this would be easy, but what they faced now was something else entirely. Marcus was not a victim. He was a fighter, one who knew how to control every move he made. The leader, still sitting on the ground, pushed himself up shakily. His pride was shattered, but his anger burned hotter. "Don't just stand there," he shouted at his friends. "Get him." His voice cracked, the authority gone. His friends hesitated, their confidence drained by the way Marcus had handled them with ease. Marcus looked around the circle. His breathing was steady, his eyes sharp but calm. He had not raised his fists once in anger. Every move had been defensive, precise, meant to stop, but not destroy. That was the difference. He was not fighting for revenge. He was fighting for respect, for dignity, for the chance to show that he would not be broken. The crowd, once eager for a spectacle, was now divided. Some still cheered for the bullies to try again, craving the drama. But more and more students were whispering to each other, admiration growing for the boy in the red hoodie who stood his ground without losing his control. Marcus's final words echoed again in their minds. "I told you to stop." The bullies were realizing the truth now, though they would not admit it out loud. They had picked the wrong boy to mess with. He was not the easy target they thought he was. He was something far stronger, and the more they pushed him, the clearer that truth became. The fight was not over yet, but the balance had shifted. The first strike had been delivered, and it was enough to change the way everyone in that courtyard saw Marcus. He was no longer just the new kid. He was someone who carried power, discipline, and quiet strength that no insult could shake. And for the first time, the bullies understood that they were not in control anymore. The courtyard had reached a kind of silence that did not feel natural. It was the silence of disbelief, the kind that comes when something happens that nobody expected. Just a few minutes ago, the crowd thought they were watching a new kid being pushed around like countless others before him. They expected laughter, humiliation, maybe a quick scuffle that ended with the bullies walking away victorious. Instead, they had watched the leader hit the ground, another boy stumbled to his knees, and a third shoved back with effortless precision. None of it looked clumsy or wild. Every movement Marcus made looked deliberate, smooth, and controlled. Students whispered to each other with wide eyes. Phones still pointed at the scene, though most of them had forgotten to even hit record. They were too caught up in the moment. The bullies regrouped, their faces red with embarrassment. For the first time, their laughter was gone. Their arrogance had been replaced by frustration and fear they tried to hide. The leader's pride had taken the biggest hit, and he stood now with fists clenched, his chest heaving as he glared at Marcus. He had never been embarrassed like this, not in front of so many people. He could not accept it. "You think you're better than us?" he spat, his voice trembling more than he wanted. "You think you can walk in here and make us look stupid?" His words were met with silence from Marcus, who did not even move. The quietness of the boy in the red hoodie was more intimidating than any insult he could have thrown back. The leader's friends glanced at him nervously. They wanted to back away, but their pride was tied to his. If he fell, they all did. So despite their hesitation, they tightened the circle again, trying to trap Marcus in the middle. The crowd leaned forward. Everyone could feel what was coming. One of the stockier boys rushed Marcus, swinging wildly in desperation. His movements were untrained, sloppy, and filled with more fear than confidence. Marcus sidestepped calmly, raised his arm and blocked the swing before it could reach him. With a twist of his body, he redirected the boy's momentum, sending him stumbling forward and nearly crashing into the ground. Gasps filled the air. Marcus still had not thrown a real punch, yet one by one the bullies were losing their footing. The leader shouted again, anger covering his fear. "Don't stop! He's just one guy. Take him down." But his words fell flat. His friends were no longer convinced. Each of them had felt Marcus's strength or seen it with their own eyes. The crowd could sense their fear. The bullies who once ruled the courtyard with arrogance were now exposed. Marcus finally moved forward, his steps calm, steady, almost slow. But the way he walked carried weight. The circle seemed to part slightly, even as the bullies tried to hold their ground. His presence alone was enough to make them step back unconsciously. His eyes were steady, not wild or angry, but sharp and unyielding. He looked like someone who had been through this before, someone who knew exactly what he was capable of. One of the boys, trying to prove himself, let out a shout and charged again. This time Marcus reacted quicker. He lowered his stance, pivoted his foot, and stopped the charge with a controlled block. In the same motion, he placed his palm firmly against the boy's chest and pushed him back with precision. The boy landed hard on the pavement, rolling onto his side. The crowd erupted with shouts of disbelief. Now it was undeniable. Marcus was not lucky. He was not just reacting by chance. He was trained and he was in control. The leader's smirk had completely disappeared. Sweat formed at his temple, and though he tried to hide it, the truth was plain. He was afraid. He had expected Marcus to fold, to take the humiliation quietly. But instead, Marcus had turned the fight around without even throwing wild punches. He had shown strength without losing control, and that made him more terrifying than any fighter filled with rage. The crowd's energy shifted. Where once they had cheered for the bullies, now more and more voices were rising in support of Marcus. Some students clapped. Others shouted encouragements. A chant even began to form, soft at first. Then louder, "Marcus, Marcus, Marcus." The bullies looked around. Realizing the tide had turned completely against them, the leader shouted over the noise, desperate to regain control. "Shut up, all of you," he barked, but no one listened. The chant grew louder, filling the courtyard, echoing against the brick walls of the school. The sound seemed to give Marcus even more presence, though he remained calm, standing silently in the center of it all. The leader, humiliated and shaking, made one final attempt. He rushed Marcus head-on, his fists flailing. But Marcus had seen it coming before it even began. With the calmness of someone who had trained 1,000 times, Marcus blocked the strike with his forearm, pivoted his body, and guided the leader's momentum past him. The bully lost his balance, stumbled forward, and fell hard to the ground once again. This time he did not get up quickly. His pride was too heavy, his confidence too broken. The courtyard roared. Students shouted, clapped, and whistled. For the first time, the leader of the bullies was down, and he did not look like he could get back up. His friends hovered nervously, torn between helping him and running away. Marcus looked around at the group, his chest rising and falling steadily, his fists still unclenched. He had not lost control once. He had not fought with rage, only discipline. He stood now not as a victim, not as someone broken, but as someone who had turned the tables completely. The leader groaned from the ground, clutching his side, his face red with humiliation. He looked up at Marcus, who stood above him. For the first time, there was no arrogance in his eyes. There was only fear and the realization that he had made a mistake. Marcus's voice broke through the noise of the crowd, calm but filled with power. "I told you to stop," he said again, his words slow and heavy. The bullies did not move. They had no more fight left in them. The crowd, however, erupted louder, cheering Marcus's name, clapping, celebrating what they had just witnessed. The new boy, the one they thought would be an easy target, had turned everything around. He had shown them that quiet strength, when paired with discipline, was more powerful than arrogance or cruelty. And as Marcus stood tall in the middle of the courtyard, the bullies shrinking back, the school realized something they would never forget. The boy in the red hoodie was not to be underestimated. He was not just strong, he was unshakable. The fight had turned completely, and from this moment on, nothing would be the same. The courtyard was still vibrating with the sound of cheers when the first teacher rushed in. Mr. Bennett, the history teacher, had heard the noise from his classroom and stormed outside, his tie swinging loosely as he pushed through the crowd. Behind him, more staff members followed, their faces a mixture of panic and authority. The moment the adults appeared, the chant of Marcus's name began to fade, replaced by hurried whispers and guilty silence. Students quickly pocketed their phones or shoved them into backpacks. Some who had been standing close stepped back, pretending they were only passing by. But the memory of what they had just witnessed would not fade as easily as their cheers. Mr. Bennett's eyes scanned the scene and fell instantly on the group of bullies. Their leader sat slouched on the ground, his face pale and red at the same time, his pride shattered. His friends hovered near him, unwilling to help him up but too ashamed to walk away. And then Mr. Bennett's eyes shifted to Marcus, who stood tall, his books once again clutched tightly against his chest, his expression calm. "What is going on here?" Mr. Bennett barked, his voice echoing against the walls. Nobody answered. The silence was heavy, broken only by the sound of one of the bullies shuffling his feet nervously. "I said, what is going on here?" he repeated, his tone sharper now. All eyes turned to Marcus, but he did not speak immediately. He knew how this looked. He was standing unshaken, while the bullies looked disheveled and humiliated. It would be easy for the teachers to assume he had started the fight. That was how things often went. People believed the one who looked strong was the aggressor, not the one who had been provoked. Marcus inhaled slowly, reminding himself of his mother's words. "Control your story before others do it for you." "I did not start it," Marcus said finally, his voice even. "They pushed me. They took my things. I asked them to stop." His eyes met Mr. Bennett's, steady and honest. "I only defended myself." The bullies erupted at once, their voices overlapping in desperate protest. "He attacked us first," one shouted. "He shoved me," another added. The leader, still on the ground, forced out a shaky voice. "He jumped at me out of nowhere, Mr. Bennett. We didn't even touch him." The crowd groaned softly. They had all seen the truth, and the lies sounded weak in comparison. Still, no student dared to speak up immediately. There was a strange loyalty among kids not to get directly involved when teachers asked questions. Marcus remained silent, not pleading, not shouting, just holding himself with the same calm control he had shown all along. Finally, a voice spoke up from the back. It was the girl who had whispered earlier in the cafeteria, the one who had been watching closely. Her voice trembled, but it carried courage. "That's not true," she said. All heads turned to her. She took a step forward, her eyes fixed on Mr. Bennett. "I saw everything. They pushed him first. They threw his books. They called him names. He told them to stop. He didn't fight until they wouldn't leave him alone." Her words rippled through the crowd, giving others the courage to nod and murmur their agreement. A boy from the soccer team stepped forward too. "She's right," he said firmly. "Marcus didn't start it. He was just trying to walk away." The tide of voices grew, and soon several students spoke at once, backing Marcus's story. The bullies looked around in shock, realizing their lies would not work this time. Their power, which had always been built on fear and silence, was crumbling under the truth spoken out loud. Mr. Bennett's eyes narrowed at the bullies, then softened slightly when he looked at Marcus. "All of you to the principal's office," he said sternly. "Now." His tone left no room for argument. The bullies groaned but obeyed, helping their leader to his feet. Marcus followed behind, his book still held close, his face calm even as whispers trailed them down the hall. The walk to the principal's office felt longer than it was. The bullies shuffled with their heads down, their earlier arrogance replaced with silence. Marcus walked steadily, his mind racing but his body calm. He knew this was not the end of it. Teachers might punish everyone involved. His mother might be called. And yet, despite all of that, he felt a quiet strength inside him. He had not lost control. He had not broken his promise. He had defended himself with discipline, not anger. That mattered. Inside the principal's office, the group was separated. The bullies sat together on one side of the room, Marcus alone on the other. Principal Harris, a tall woman with sharp glasses and a reputation for fairness, listened patiently as Mr. Bennett explained what he had seen. Then she turned to the students. "I will hear each of you," she said firmly. The bullies spoke first, each one trying to twist the story in their favor. Their voices wavered, their details contradicted each other, and as they spoke, Principal Harris's frown deepened. When it was Marcus's turn, he did not dramatize. He did not exaggerate. He told the story simply and truthfully. How he had tried to ignore them, how they had pushed him, how he had asked them to stop, how they had scattered his belongings. "I only defended myself when I had no other choice," he finished quietly. Principal Harris leaned back in her chair, studying him. Her silence stretched, making the bullies squirm in their seats. Finally, she nodded. "That matches the accounts of other students I have already spoken to," she said. The bullies stiffened in shock. It seems clear that Marcus did not start this. Relief spread through Marcus's chest, though he kept his expression composed. The bullies, on the other hand, slumped in defeat. Their leader opened his mouth to argue, but Principal Harris silenced him with a raised hand. "Enough. You have caused disruption, humiliation, and intimidation in this school. There will be consequences. Detention, letters home, suspension. The punishments rolled out one by one." The bullies groaned, but there was no escape. For once, their lies had failed them. Their power had failed them. Marcus was not completely free of consequence either. "Though you defended yourself," Principal Harris said, "physical confrontation is still a violation of school policy. I understand why it happened, but rules must be followed. Consider this a warning." She looked at him closely. "I will also be calling your mother. I want her to know what happened, and I want her to hear that you showed control." Marcus nodded. He could accept that. A warning was nothing compared to the pride of knowing he had stood tall without losing himself. When he left the office, the whispers in the hallway grew louder. Students looked at him with new eyes. Some smiled at him, some nodded with respect, and others simply watched him pass, knowing something had shifted. The boy in the red hoodie was no longer just a new kid. He was a symbol of strength, quiet, steady, and unbreakable. That evening, when Marcus walked home, he found his mother waiting on the porch, arms folded, concern etched on her face. She had already received the call. He explained everything step by step, just as he had told Principal Harris. When he finished, she sighed, then reached out and hugged him tightly. "I know it was not easy," she whispered. "I know you held back. That's what makes me proud. You showed strength without letting hate control you." Marcus hugged her back, the weight of the day finally lifting. He had not just survived his first day, he had changed it. And deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. His story at this school had just started, and already, the bullies who once thought they ruled it had been reminded of an important truth. Respect is not taken by force. It is earned through character. The days following the courtyard incident carried an energy that Marcus could feel the moment he stepped back into school. Hallways that once held whispers of mockery now carried murmurs of respect. Students who had once stared at him with judgment now glanced with quiet admiration, some even nodding or offering a small smile as he passed. The story of what had happened spread faster than anything else in recent memory. Every student seemed to know the details, though many exaggerated them. Some said Marcus had knocked down 5 boys at once, others claimed he had fists like steel. Marcus ignored all of it. He did not care for rumors, and he certainly did not enjoy attention. What mattered to him was that he had not broken his promise to his mother. He had shown restraint. He had fought only when left with no other choice, and he had done it without letting anger consume him. That was the victory he valued most. The bullies, on the other hand, walked through the halls differently now. Their shoulders, once held high with arrogance, slumped under the weight of humiliation. They avoided eye contact, not only with Marcus, but with many of the students who had witnessed their fall. They still whispered among themselves, still tried to appear tough in small ways, but their grip on the school had loosened. The fear they once inspired had been replaced with the memory of their defeat. For the first time in years, other students walked the hallways without feeling the shadow of the bullies looming over them. Marcus had broken more than their pride. He had broken their hold on the school. Teachers noticed the change too. Some still kept a close watch on Marcus, cautious because of the confrontation, but others quietly admired how he carried himself afterward. He did not boast. He did not provoke. He attended his classes, raised his hand when he needed to, and sat quietly in the cafeteria with the same composure he always had. If anything, he seemed even quieter than before, as though the attention only made him retreat deeper into himself. But students still found ways to approach him. Some asked if he had really trained in boxing. Others wanted to know how he stayed so calm under pressure. A few even admitted that they had been scared for him at first but were glad he had stood his ground. Marcus never gave long answers. He would simply nod, smile politely, and reply with short, steady words. "I trained," or, "It was about control." His mother noticed the difference in him as well. At home, he was more thoughtful, spending time not only on his schoolwork but also on helping around the house and looking after his younger sister. She asked him one evening while they sat at the kitchen table, "Do you feel proud of what you did?" Marcus thought about it for a long moment before answering. "I feel proud I didn't lose myself," he said. His mother smiled, her eyes soft but full of emotion. "That's what I wanted to hear." The lesson Marcus had given to the school did not come from how hard he could strike, but from how he chose not to use his strength recklessly. Students remembered his calm voice telling the bullies to stop. They remembered how he had stood with control even when pushed, mocked, and humiliated. They remembered that when he finally moved, it was not with rage but with discipline. That memory planted something important in the minds of those who had seen it. True strength was not about dominating others but about mastering yourself. The bullies, meanwhile, faced more consequences than they expected. Suspension had been hard enough, but the real punishment came from the loss of their power. Once they returned, they found that the same students who had once laughed at their jokes and followed them around no longer did so. The crowd had shifted. Respect now belonged to Marcus, though he had never asked for it. They resented him for it, but they also feared him in a way that kept them at a distance. Slowly, their group dissolved into the background, no longer ruling the school but becoming just another set of faces in the hallway. One afternoon, Marcus sat on the bleachers after school, his books beside him as he waited for his sister to finish her club activity. The leader of the bullies approached him, his steps hesitant, his face still bruised with shame. For a long moment he stood there in silence, staring at the ground. Marcus watched him quietly, waiting. Finally the boy muttered, "I shouldn't have done what I did." His voice was low, almost swallowed by the wind. I thought making you look weak would make me stronger, but it didn't. It just made me look small." Marcus studied him, unsure if the words were sincere or spoken out of desperation. Still, he answered with the same calmness he always carried. "You don't have to prove strength by hurting people," he said. "You just have to respect yourself and others." The boy nodded, unable to meet Marcus's eyes, and walked away. Whether it was the beginning of change or just a moment of guilt, Marcus could not know. But it was enough to show that the lesson had reached even the one who needed it most. Weeks passed, and the story of Marcus became less about a fight and more about a message. Students spoke about him not as the boy who beat the bullies, but as the boy who showed control when it mattered most. Teachers used his example in quiet conversations, reminding others that discipline and respect carried more weight than arrogance or cruelty. Even younger students began to look at Marcus as someone to admire, someone who proved that silence did not mean weakness and that calm did not mean surrender. For Marcus, life did not change in the way others thought it would. He did not seek popularity, nor did he enjoy being the center of attention. What changed for him was simpler. He no longer felt like an outsider. He walked the halls with his head high, not because he had defeated anyone, but because he had earned respect without betraying who he was.